So the release of the Switch 2 inches ever closer, as we can now officially say that the Switch 2 releases next week. However, what I want to talk about in this video is not the launch and release of the console and Mario Kart World next week. It's actually what to expect from the first Nintendo Direct that will happen after the release of the Switch 2, so the first Nintendo Direct of the next generation era, which we certainly don't know when that's going to be, but I have some thoughts and predictions, and I want to discuss when I think it may happen, and as irresponsible as it may be, just for fun, to talk about what we might be able to expect in that Nintendo Direct. Though I will say, it is really wild that the Nintendo Switch 2 is so close, and I talked about it on my channel and made a video the day the pre-orders went up. I, of course, did get mine pre-ordered in person at GameStop. I live on the west coast of the United States, so I'm actually going to be able to pick up my Nintendo Switch 2 on Wednesday, June 4th at 9 p.m. local time for me. On the east coast of the States, it's going to be actually midnight. Other parts of the world, I'm not quite sure how that lines up time-wise, so if you're in a different country that isn't North America, the United States, or whatever, I'd love to hear from you what time it becomes available if you've also had your Switch 2 pre-ordered for yourself. But for me, again, like I said, I'm locked and stocked. I'm 9 p.m. the night before. I cannot freaking wait. So we have the Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo's next generation starting next week on Thursday, June 5th. But when will we get that first Nintendo Direct that's going to occur in the next generation Switch 2 era? I personally think, and I'm sure that a lot of us probably agree with this, that there's a great chance that the typical June Nintendo Direct that we've seen happen many times over the years, it used to happen for E3, now with E3 gone, we do see a lot of companies still give some sort of big presentation, Nintendo included, in the month of June. And so how crazy would it be if in the first week of the month they release their next generation console, and maybe in the last week of the month, the last few days of June, they have a Nintendo Direct? That kind of E3 summer showcase feeling massive drop of news and information and updates and games, except this time they would be doing it in a brand new next generation era. Of course, we can't forget that September is also a month that Nintendo almost every year has a Nintendo Direct as well. So maybe they do something strange where they forego a standard wider Nintendo Direct in the month of June or sometime over the summer, and maybe they rely on a Donkey Kong specific Direct, which I think they may do, and a Metroid Prime 4 specific Direct, which I think they may do, and instead they just wait until September, and maybe the first big traditional Direct in the Switch 2 era, they're going to wait a few months and do it in September. I do think that that is an option on the table. However, I'm going to just be optimistic and stick to my initial thoughts that, yeah, by the end of the month, literally weeks after the Switch 2 releases, they might be giving us that first Nintendo Direct. So that's what I want to hope happens. We can't forget how the cadence of the release of the Switch and their first presentation, their first Nintendo Direct showcase, happened back in 2017. And it was a different time because E3 still existed. And sadly, again, we don't live in that world anymore, and it really sucks. But at the time, in 2017, E3 was a real thing. So it was March 2017 that the initial Switch came out, and the timing was incredible and perfect because it was only 3 months later, in June of 2017, that E3 happened. So Nintendo was fortunate enough to release with 3 months leeway from the release of the console to their first time addressing the world about new updates for their brand new Switch console, which also happened to be E3, and they had a fantastic showcase. That's where they first revealed the existence of Metroid Prime 4, and even though things went totally crazy for the next 8 years for that game, at the time, it was massive and a very strong way to start the brand new Switch generation. So now let's get to the fun and the irresponsible part of this, and let's just talk about what we might see. And there's no way anything I could predict has that good of a chance of being true. We know so little because we haven't even had the Switch 2 in our hands yet, right? So again, I'm acknowledging that this is kind of silly. There's very little evidence to support much of anything. We're just having fun here, so don't overthink it, okay? And I will be super optimistic when I talk about this. But I'm going to start off with the one that I think actually is the most realistic and makes the most sense for the first Nintendo Direct after the Switch 2 releases. And I do think they're going to significantly address Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and I think that that will be the time that they give us the official date, and I think they will show us more Switch 2 footage, and probably just a brand new trailer and really dive into and set up the story and the context and the conflict of the game. Now, obviously, I think they would also be addressing the fact that there will be a Switch 1 version of this game, and let's say we live in a crazy world where these two versions of Metroid Prime 4 don't release on the same day. I'm not predicting that happens, but let's pretend one of the versions will come out first and then the other one comes out later. I think that they will tell us that as well. So this first Nintendo Direct, after the Switch 2 releases, will probably be addressing Switch 2 and Switch 1 games. Prime 4 becomes one of the few cross-generation titles. So I think they might, again, show Switch 2 footage. Maybe they talk about a few other Switch 2 exclusive features that we don't yet know about. That would be very exciting. But most importantly, I want to double down on new footage, some story context, and most importantly, the official release date. Now let's get the other elephant out of the room right now, which is Mario. A lot of us thought we were going to see the new 3D Mario game revealed at the Switch 2 Direct on April 2nd. They did not do that. A lot of folks are disappointed. I'm personally not disappointed because I know that game is going to come eventually, and I am so over the moon excited for Donkey Kong Bonanza that I'm fine. I get my big platforming crazy adventure game that I want. It's only a month after the Switch 2 releases. As I've said before, it comes out the day after my birthday, so that's just super fun for me personally. And it's also Donkey Kong. Like, we get Mario games every year. We still probably will get a Mario game this year. So I kind of like the fact that they're saving Mario for later. And the first big single-player adventure for the Switch 2 I have to look forward to is Donkey Kong. And we haven't had a new Donkey Kong game in over a decade. So to me, it actually feels weirdly more significant. Even though a new Mario game will be more exciting, I'm sure it'll be the bigger, better game even than Donkey Kong. I'm thrilled that we're getting Donkey Kong. That said, back to Mario. I think a lot of us feel that Nintendo is prepping the big new 3D Mario game for the Switch 2. It's going to be amazing, I'm sure. So to me, the question is, do they want to release the new 3D Mario game in year one for the Switch 2? Or do they want to be more strategic and save that massive title for maybe year two and release it in 2026? If it's 2026... I don't know if they're going to show it to us in this Direct, or if they do, it'll be a very, very small tease. If it is meant to be their big holiday title, as opposed to relying on something like Pokemon and Metroid as a combination, which I've talked before, then yes, they're going to show us Mario in this Direct. So it depends on what their plan is for that big 3D Mario game, but it certainly might be addressed in some way, shape, or form. And so, of course, I have to talk about it in this conversation. I want to drop a couple of other first-party games that might be talked about or teased or announced in the first Nintendo Direct as well. The first would be a new Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem has really rose to prominence in the Switch era, which I'm very glad to see. Three Houses is one of my favorite first-party Nintendo games. And while I've liked the Fire Emblem series going back to Awakening, it's not typically my kind of genre. RPGs, JRPGs, strategy games, they just don't really work for me, but Fire Emblem Three Houses floored me. Loved it to death. And Fire Emblem Engage is also very, very good. I think the combat was better than Three Houses, but I still overall liked the structure and story of Three Houses more. That being said, since Fire Emblem Awakening on the 3DS, it's really become a popular series. They even made two Warriors games out of Fire Emblem, which is also wild. So I think there's a great chance that maybe they tease or announce a brand new Fire Emblem game. Even though Engage was pretty recent, when it comes to the new generation, I feel like they might already be ready to tease or announce the follow-up game. So Fire Emblem is on my radar. I also think we need to talk about some kind of online-focused game. Nintendo wanting to release a first-party title that helps push their online NSO subscriptions. We know Mario Kart is doing that day one with the Switch 2, but what about other games and IPs from Nintendo? So, Splatoon 4, a new Smash Brothers game, which is a little bit tricky with Sakurai working on the Kirby game, but who even knows? So I'm just going to throw it out there. Splatoon, a new Smash Brothers game, maybe even a new IP. You know, at the beginning of the Switch, they had a new IP with ARMS, and that was a multiplayer and online-focused game. So I mean, I don't think we're going to get ARMS 2 for the Switch 2, but some kind of another new IP that really very much relies on online play and something to push NSO subscriptions. I think we should keep our eyes peeled for something like that in the first Direct. Splatoon, Smash Brothers, new IP, or something else that I may be just brain farting that would be online multiplayer focused. And then also Monolith Soft's new game. That is something we're all waiting for. We know that they're working on something. I want to believe it's another Xenoblade game because I'm a simple man who doesn't play many JRPGs, but I love the Xenoblade games, so I would hope it's a new Xenoblade game. That said, new IPs are very important, and from what I've heard, I could be wrong on this, so you RPG fans can correct me. From what I've heard, I think we know enough about what they're making to know that it's not supposed to be a Xenoblade game. So if it's a new IP, great. And I love Monolith, so I will keep my mind open as a non-RPG player. I will keep my mind open for whatever they're making. I also love, by the way, Batten Kaitos. That's another Monolith series that I love, and I own the first one still on my GameCube, so whatever they do, I'm paying attention, and so I think that's another first-party studio that we might hear from in the first Direct as well. Now, will we hear from Zelda in some way? Maybe, but I think that would only happen in the form of, like, the Wind Waker Twilight Princess ports that we've been waiting for, or maybe some kind of another re-release, or even like a remake. I mean, maybe something crazy like that Ocarina of Time remake is announced. I don't really know that I believe in that thing, but it sure would be great. As far as the next mainline Zelda, the one that's following up Tears of the Kingdom, obviously I don't think any of us should expect to hear from Zelda to that capacity in this Direct, but I'm sure there'll be something Zelda related. Maybe they even just announce new features coming to the Switch 2 editions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Something like that. So who knows there? Jury's out when it comes to Zelda in the first Direct. Probably not really going to be there. But it is important to talk about third-party titles because third parties are obviously playing a very, very big, significant role for the Switch 2, which I think is a good thing. We're starting off very strong with Cyberpunk and, you know, game key card controversies aside, getting stuff like Street Fighter and Yakuza and a few other titles at launch is also very huge. And, you know, the Duskbloods being a third-party exclusive coming to the Switch 2 next year, massive news. So would we hear from third parties in this first Direct? I certainly think so. To me, first and foremost is Call of Duty. There is no doubt in my mind that Call of Duty will be addressed for the Switch 2 sometime soon, because we know that that series is coming to Switch to Nintendo consoles for the next 10 years. Didn't show up last year, so 2025 to me will be the first year. I don't know if it's coming to Switch 1, but I absolutely believe this year's Call of Duty will come to the Switch 2, so what a great time to confirm that, you know? Whether Activision wants to reveal it prior to the Switch 2 Direct, you know, that remains to be seen. But I feel like the first Direct will be the ideal time to finally address and showcase Call of Duty coming back to Nintendo after a very, very long hiatus. Another thing I want to talk about is going to be controversial. And we know that everything with Microsoft and Xbox and first-party and exclusive games is very strange. Microsoft is abandoning exclusivity. They're sending their IPs to Nintendo and PlayStation platforms. Forza and Gears of War recently announced to be coming to a PlayStation 5. Indiana Jones already, I believe, released for the PlayStation 5. So would we see some massive Xbox titles announced for the Switch 2 in the first Direct? I think yes. Now that could be anything as simple as something we already know about, like Forza, you know, or Sea of Thieves, maybe, coming to the Switch 2. Maybe they make a big jump and they confirm Gears of War is also coming to Switch 2 alongside PlayStation. That would be massive and huge. But the even bigger deal to me would be Starfield. Would this be the time that they confirm, as people have theorized for a while, that Starfield will jump ship from the Xbox and make it to PlayStation and or Nintendo? What if the first time that Microsoft reveals Starfield making the jump is actually in the Switch 2 Direct for the Switch 2? Now, I would think it would also be coming to PS5 if they make that announcement, but maybe they allow Nintendo to be the first company to make that confirmation. Nintendo talks about it coming to the Switch 2 only, and then of course we read and learn after the Direct that it's also coming to PlayStation 5. That's what I think may happen there. Huge deal, I know, but if I was to make a big swing, I think it would be Starfield. And then I just want to touch on another game that makes a lot of sense to be announced for the Switch 2, which would be Doom: The Dark Ages. It's a very recent, fresh game. I actually just beat the game yesterday on my PlayStation 5, and I loved it. I liked it even more than Doom Eternal. I think it's fantastic. And it's very new, very recent. The first two Doom reboot games came to the Switch 1, and so with the Switch 2 releasing next week, of a very shortly delayed port of Doom: The Dark Ages makes a lot of sense. So showing and confirming Doom: The Dark Ages in the first Nintendo Direct could be a huge win, and hopefully it releases very soon after, and maybe it's a big third-party port that releases early on in the life of the Switch 2. So these are probably some of my biggest swings. Now, when it comes to all the first-party stuff, I'm just going to tell you, I don't think all of those things are going to happen. We're not going to get Metroid and Mario, and Zelda, and Splatoon, and Smash Brothers, and a new IP, and Monolith's game all in the same Direct. I mean, take any two of those and put them together, and maybe any two of those will show up in this Direct, but we're not going to get all of them. We'll get a few first-party exciting announcements and updates about Metroid, for example, a bunch of filler stuff and indie stuff and old ports, and then probably a couple of big third-party games, like I talked about, your Starfield and your Call of Duty and whatnot, other Xbox games, things like that. And then, of course, yes, there will be one last big thing. Who knows what that could be? Updates from Mario Kart World might even be discussed in the first Nintendo Direct. I do want to remember to bring that up. Maybe they actually start to double down on new content that will come, both free and paid DLC throughout the life of Mario Kart World. That will probably be addressed in the first Direct as well. Just a guess, but it makes sense to me. And so, yeah, without wasting too much time predicting even more things, I think I'll leave it here with the stuff that I discussed. Ultimately, what I want to get across is that the first Direct might happen very soon after the Switch 2 releases, as early as 3 or 4 weeks later. And I think we're going to hear about Mario, I think we're going to get Metroid information, and I think we're going to get some big third-party titles. And a game that will push NSO subscriptions. This is my way too early, very irresponsible predictions of the first Direct to happen in the Switch 2 era. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed. Share your own thoughts on my predictions and your own below. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.